today in the second of a series of virtual brown bag luncheons sponsored by 4 Tompkins County offices: the Office of Human Rights, the Health Department, the Mental Health Services, and the Tompkins Chief Equity and Diversity Officer. I am Ken Clark, Director of the Office of Human Rights. Last month, we kicked off this series with an excellent panel discussing the intersecting pandemics of COVID-19, racism, addiction, and poverty. Today, we have another excellent group of experts to discuss COVID-19, compassionate mental health, and social services. Our discussion last month highlighted the ways in which the pandemic placed in bold relief the pervasive, persistent problems of racism, addiction, and poverty, and their intersectionality. Today, we will focus on populations that chronically struggle with mental health issues, homelessness, addiction, and life issues. They have experienced additional stress and worsened circumstances due to the coronavirus. There are also those among us who have lived with low-lying, under-the-surface mental health issues before the pandemic. Now these struggles have intensified since the inception of the pandemic. The Modern Healthcare website identifies the homeless as one of the most vulnerable populations in this pandemic. Yet statistically speaking, they are often invisible victims. The primary federal agency with oversight of homeless programs has not utilized this national network of providers to gather information to trace infections or death. Yet the homeless and those struggling with substance abuse interact more with the public than other high-risk groups in locations such as nursing homes or prisons. That public includes public health, mental health, and social service workers who interact with them where they are, on the street, in the encampment locally, some call the jungle, at St. John's Community Services, or hotels and motels housing the homeless. Homeless expert in University of California at San Francisco, Professor of Medicine Margot Kushel, has said the pandemic is a crisis within a crisis of homelessness. Our county's public health and mental health experts acknowledge the levels of stress and anxiety under which many are living due to COVID-19. There's general concern about catching the coronavirus, the alteration of work and living routines, the loss of work, daycare for preschoolers, planning arrangements for school-aged children to learn remotely, social distancing and social isolation. Individuals accustomed to walking into clinics, agencies, and other service providers to address their needs now talk to helping professionals by phone or computer, if they have those resources. Many have applied the guidance provided on the websites of the county agencies to engage in self-care to protect their emotional and mental well-being. Yet, as Dr. Gina Lynham of the Henry Ford Health System in Detroit has written, socioeconomic barriers create a lack of access to care in underserved communities. In this context, how can compassionate mental health and social services be provided? We have a team of experts who will respond to this question. Susan Spicer, Clinic Supervisor for Tompkins County Mental Health Services, will outline a compassionate mental health approach. She'll be followed by Tammy Baker, Outreach Coordinator for Family and Children's Services of Ithaca, who will discuss how underserved and homeless populations and those struggling with substance abuse are connected to social and mental health networks. Then Kit Kephart, Tompkins County Department of Social Services Commissioner, and Deana Bodnar, the Deputy Commissioner of DSS, will talk about the compassionate delivery of social services within a regulatory framework. Several, if not all, of the panelists will talk about the underlying mental health issues prevalent before and exacerbated by the pandemic throughout their presentations. Susan, lead us off.
Okay, thank you. My name is Susan Spicer. As was said, I'm the supervisor and the acting clinic director at Tompkins County Mental Health Services. I've been with TCMH for about 20 years, and I've been working in the mental health field for over 30 years. So I've been asked to speak briefly to 2 subjects. What is the compassionate approach to mental health during the COVID-19 crisis? and also what's happening with individuals who have low-lying symptoms prior to the pandemic. So I'm going to address both issues at once. Our panel decided not to use graphics, so I'm now going to ask you to use your imagination. I want you to imagine a scale from 0 to 10, a scale that looks like a ruler. On this scale, we're going to measure the distress of individuals, or as a mental health professional, I would say symptoms. At the 0 end of the scale, we would see someone like the Dalai Lama. I chose the Dalai Lama because I think that of him as someone who's actually impervious to stress. Stress doesn't affect him. I don't actually know the Dalai Lama. I hope he's doing well. On the other end of the scale, at the 10, we would see individuals with many symptoms or acute distress. These individuals would be experiencing symptoms of severe psychosis, severe distress. And they may be having suicidal thinking or intent. So you're with me. We're imagining this scale where we're measuring distress, 0 being no distress, 10 being significant distress. Now I want to apply 3 groups of people to this scale. The first group of individuals are those who have severe mental illness. They have a severe mental health disorder. We're talking about people who make up about 3 to 5% of the population. Tompkins County Mental Health Services has an expertise in treating this group of individuals. Prior to the pandemic, you might find these folks somewhere on the scale of 0 to 10 in the 5 to 6 range. Even with medication, supportive treatment, this group still had symptoms. And then the COVID-19 crisis hit. For this group of people, they moved up the scale 2 to 3 or even 4 notches. Their symptoms became severe. They still need acute treatment, maybe even hospitalization. During the pandemic, our crisis services have increased triple to quadruple, and much of it is surrounding this group of people. The second group of people is what Ken described as people with low-lying symptoms prior to the pandemic. Examples of what this might look like is someone who is feeling blue, but still able to get up, get in the shower, go to work. Another example would be someone whose anxiety is manageable and not interfering with their daily life. On our scale of 0 to 10, this group might be a 3 or maybe even a 4. Now let's add the COVID crisis. Like the first group, this group moves up the scale 2 or 3 notches, and now they're at 5 or maybe even a 6. The depressed person is now calling in sick frequently because they can't get out of bed. The person who was mildly anxious before the crisis is now having 2 panic attacks a day. So these folks may need treatment now. The last group I want to apply is you, me, and everyone else. If we use our scale and we think back to October 2019, where would we put ourselves on the scale last year? Last year on October 29th, a year ago, I was in Fort Myers, Florida. I was taking photos of birds. I was picking shells. This is a very different year. So can you think about where you stand on the scale today? We can imagine that, like other groups, the rest of us had moved up that scale 2 or 3 notches. No matter, it's very individual. It's very individual. For some, managing stress is easier than for others. We're not here to judge your coping. How you deal with stress is okay. But it's important to know what your abilities are and how you cope. So this doesn't sound good, Susan. You're telling us we're all stressed out. How does that help? And that's where we have to add compassion. Compassion for yourself and compassion for others. What is compassionate care and how does it help? Compassion is a focused understanding and acknowledgement of suffering. So what can we do? You start with having compassion for yourself. Understand and acknowledge your distress. This is the first step to decreasing your suffering. Understand that what you're feeling is real. It makes sense that you would feel this way. And you need to understand that your distress is valid. The next thing to do is to take inventory of your skill set and your needs. How do I cope? What do I need to do right now? Who can help me? So then you begin to reach out. You reach out to your natural supports, your friends, your family, your AA sponsor maybe. If you work for one of the larger entities in Tompkins County, like Cornell or CMC, you most likely have an EAP, an employee assistance program that where you can get help. If, for instance, you recognize that one of the things you're struggling with is sleep, your distress is causing you not to sleep, you might start with your primary care physician. That's someone you know, that's someone who knows you well. I also want to plug a resource, the Mental Health Association in Tompkins County. They're an advocacy and an education organization. If you go to their homepage, there's a button labeled Find a Local Therapist. And that provides information about various providers, including their specialties, even what insurance they take. Great resource. And of course, there's Tompkins County Mental Health Services. We have a wide range of programs to help treat symptoms. And one more thing about compassion, remember that everyone you encounter is on this scale. Some are closer to 0 and some are closer to 10. So as you reach out for help, remember that your primary care is on the scale. And that your primary care may have jumped up a few notches too. People in the healthcare professionals are definitely affected by the COVID crisis. If you're someone who's used to, for instance, reaching out to your priest, remember that your priest is on the scale. So is your auto mechanic. So is your DSS caseworker. So the idea that we practice is that we practice compassion for ourselves and others. And one last thing, I just want to say something about the signs. The signs say, wear a mask and keep a social distance of 6 feet. If we could add one more line to that that said, and practice compassion for yourself and others, if we could do that, it's possible that not only would we get to the other side of this crisis faster, but we'd be in much better shape when we got there. Thanks, that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Susan. Tammy?
So hi, everybody. So Tammy Baker, community outreach worker with Family and Children's Service. So basically the community outreach program is street outreach. I like to say it's street outreach rather than community outreach because a lot of organizations have a community outreach worker, but the street outreach is really specific. It's really being in the streets, meeting people where they're at, people that are showing up with homeless, mental health, substance use. So we work with that population. We also work with businesses downtown. So if businesses see somebody that's distressed, they will call us. Part of our mission is to deal with non-emergency police calls. So this position has been going on since 2015. It's just been myself. And in August of 2019, we have another worker, Natalia Kolik. So we not only work with people in the streets, we help them get connected to services. So since COVID, actually, I'll just keep, so basically what we do is help people get connected to services. A lot of the folks that we work with don't have phones. They don't have access to technology. So they use our phone. We set up appointments for them. We also work with the court system. So if people, a lot of the people that we work with are also intertwined with the court system. So we help them get connected to the courts. We remind them of their appointments. Our phones have we are the message for a lot of the people. So service providers call us to help stay in touch with a particular individual. So everything we do is compassionate, trauma informed. Meeting somebody in the street is really, it's such a sweet opportunity. People have trauma. They've been also traumatized by the system. So once they've been traumatized by the system, there's a hesitancy to go back. So what we do is we go to appointments with people. We fill out forms with them. It can be really intimidating to fill out form after form. It's a lot of personal information. So what we do, we have the advantage of we can buy coffee, food, we sit down, fill out the forms and help people deliver the forms. one of the sweetnesses around the outreach program is we don't have a formal intake process. So we just meet somebody where they're at, get some basic information, and slowly build a relationship to find out more of what they need. Since COVID, one of the things that has happened is we work with Reach Medical. Reach Medical is going out to the homeless encampments 2 days a week to do telehealth. So that's been an advantage. So people that are in the encampments can get service now instead of, I think it's really helped their no-show rates. So that's an advantage since COVID, is we have the telehealth. Reach is also doing COVID testing on Tuesdays in the encampment for people that want it. What else do we do? So one of the things that basically that's kind of the overview. I think I'm going to just keep this piece short. So we work closely with all the service providers. We work closely with DSS. DSS call Natalia and I often to find out somebody's homeless status. We help bring people into their appointments. We also work closely with the police department. We're sort of ahead of the game, this community, in terms of the re-envisioning or reimagining public safety. What we do is sometimes police officers call us when they get a call around a distressed individual. They'll say, hey, Tammy or Natalia, this is more of a social work sort of position. And so we work really closely with them. And a lot of the businesses downtown will call us instead of calling the police officer. Recently, there was a gentleman going into Alphabet Soup, very distressed. It was COVID. He didn't want to wear a mask. He got upset. He spit on the floor. And they told him he can't come back. He does present with a lot of mental health. He came back the next day. So they called me. I went down, brought the person outside, talked with him. He understood that what he did wasn't okay. He was willing to apologize to the store. He told me the toy that he wanted. So I went into the store. I bought the toy for him. The owner came out and he apologized. He also told me who his worker was at Tompkins County Mental Health. So I was able to provide that information to his worker so they could help him understand why he wasn't allowed to go back into that store. So that's a lot of the work that we do in terms of, I feel like we weave people's service providers together and provide that kind of support. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so much, Tammy. Now, Kit.
Hi, I'm Kit Kephart. I'm the commissioner at the Department of Social Services. Obviously, thank you, Tammy and Susan. I think obviously DSS works very closely with both of your organizations, and I think we form a network of supports for folks. As people know, DSS is a service organization. We're really dedicated to supporting the community in times of need. And I'm not sure we've ever experienced a greater time than we're in right now. Our eligibility divisions provide a range of services. We administer state and federal programs locally. So we are always providing people with things like temporary assistance, homeless housing supports, heating and energy assistance. People know that as HEAP. Supplemental nutrition assistance, food supports, as well as things like employment and child welfare supports. Our operations have really changed a lot since COVID-19 hit, but our goals are still the same: to really compassionately support people and to provide all the supports that we can throughout the current crisis. All of our programs have been fully operational through this crisis, and we have continued to try to, to network and support people, as well as looking at how do we support people in ways that that help people feel like they are getting services without having to risk. There's a lot of concerns that people have right now about not wanting to interact face-to-face and not wanting exposure. And so we have been able to really look at changing some of our practices in light of the current situation. So currently we are able to support people by phone from many of our current programs. If people want to apply for things like temporary assistance, SNAP, HEAP, They can reach out to us by phone. The county website, if you go to the specific social services page, there's a lot of good contact information there. If you're looking for a specific program or you want to reach somebody in that program, there are phone numbers there that will help guide people through the process. People can still come to our front door, however, and we recognize, especially when it comes to folks that are homeless or that are in need of immediate assistance, they can come to the front door. Our security team is screening people just like many other businesses right now. They screen people for risk of COVID, and it is preferable that we serve people remotely when we can. Most of that for us is happening over the phone. However, if people have other resources, if somebody has a tablet or a computer and they want to do that through a Skype link or something like that, we can arrange that most of the time. We're really pleased. A couple of new things are kind of coming as a result of some of the crisis. So we're really pleased that we've been able to put a mobile document upload in place, which is, there's a link to the app on our webpage. So what this means for people is that in the past, people have actually had to come into the building, oftentimes to use the photocopier, and then give us hard copies of their essential documents to be able to complete an application, things like birth certificates and social security cards and all of that, driver's license. But at present, there's a mobile document upload that you can download onto your phone, and then people can actually use their phones to record those documents and send them, upload them to the repository, and workers can just go right in and get them and complete the application. So that's been a real positive for people, and we want to get the word out about that. And if people have any problems with it or have questions about it, please reach out to to the worker or call our main number, and we can support people with that. We also have received what's called an ESG grant through New York State. We've just recently gotten this, and we are just getting this up and running. So ESG stands for Emergency Solutions Grant. This comes to us through one of our state partners, OTDA, and it will provide, we've worked with a number of partners in the community, the Continuum of Care, which is a group that really looks at how homeless folks are served, with the Human Services Coalition, with a number of other providers to kind of look at how do we get this up and running. This will provide case management, eviction prevention services, rental assistance, rapid rehousing supports. So there's a number of supports coming for people. We recognize, especially with the eviction moratoriums going away, we have real concerns for people, and we want to make sure that people know to reach out, communicate with us, and we will help get people set up with all that we can. Again, the Emergency Services Division here at DSS is going to be the primary connection to that. So again, the phone numbers for that are on our website, and people can reach out and make a connection around that. Our Code Blue program is, we're anticipating will be up and running soon. I would anticipate this week. Code Blue, as probably everybody remembers, is a program that goes into effect every winter when the temperature drops down to 32 degrees with wind chill. So that provides homeless housing supports for people who don't have a place to go when the temperature becomes inclement. So we want to support people with that. And again, our Emergency Services Division is the place to reach out for that program as well. We're also a couple of kind of, especially in the compassionate kind of aisle, we are really pleased to be working with New York State in our Child Welfare Division to bring a new approach to children's services. It's a modality called Signs of Safety. And this is really a support and an approach that helps support the way that we work collaboratively with families. We're always looking to partner with families, not be in a position where we are so much the authority, although we recognize that there's that dynamic, but to really try to be as supportive with families as we can, and to be a resource more than anything to people. And lastly, in an effort to really support people through a difficult time, we've been training staff on solution-focused trauma-informed care. I'm going to turn it over to Deana Bodnar, Deputy Commissioner here at DSS, to just talk a little bit about the work that's been going into working with staff and to try around that approach and why we feel like that's important.
Thank you, Kit. And this circles back around to where Susan started us all talking about the stress people are under, both clients, how that's intensified, and then staff themselves. So solution-focused trauma-informed care is a model of working with folks where trauma-informed care is taking into account the impacts of the stress that people are experiencing. So with social services folks who we work with through child welfare, or who need to come to us for homeless services or nutrition supports, are already stressed. And a number of them, we know from the science, have experienced significant trauma in their lives. So they're already at a place where they're feeling vulnerable. And so trauma-informed care is a framework to keep that in mind. So we are not mental health workers, but the goal with training our staff in this framework is for staff to keep in mind that folks are already vulnerable and already stressed. And so to think about that as we're talking with them and having to ask questions or find supports for them, to keep in mind their safety and working collaboratively with them. And when we can, offer them choices and empower them. So that's the trauma-informed care part. And the solution-focused part is to help people look at what's already working. So again, in our roles with social services, we aren't going to go in and do work more deeply with people like mental health would. So our goal is to look at what's already working for you and let's support that. And then if there's other services we can connect you to deal with some other issues, we're going to do that. And so all of this is sort of to keep in mind that we want to support people in a compassionate, caring way. In our role in social services, there sometimes, like Ken opened, there's regulations and things we have to attend to, but within that, we can do our best to remember what clients are up against. And more recent, so we've trained our staff in children's services, in emergency services, temporary assistance intake in this model before COVID. So people already have that framework, and now we're going through and doing shorter sessions with folks to remind them that COVID has intensified this, and COVID has actually impacted them, like Susan was pointing out. So to remember this and keep this in mind with your colleagues and our other partners in the community, that we're all doing this. And so to have more patience, have more compassion with each other in how we deliver services to our clients and how we interact with our colleagues in the community.
Well, thank you, Deana and Kit. And we very much appreciate the work that all of you do. And I wanted to, before we move to questions and answers, I wanted to give Tammy an opportunity to add to her remarks something that she wanted to mention.
Thank you, Ken. So one of the things I forgot to mention was, since COVID, there's no warming stations for the population that I work with. So the Friendship Center, because they only have a certain amount of people in there. So people are in the streets. When COVID first hit, it was cold, it was raining. So we were out giving out masks, hand sanitizers, and hand warmers. The Jenkins Center from Mental Health Association, that was a place where people could go and get respite during the day. They could get food. That's closed, and that's not going to be opening again. They do have a warm line, though, a peer support line It's 9 to 2 Monday through Friday, and I don't have the number. I don't know if Susan, if you have the number, but I'll get that for you before the end. So Mental Health Association does have a warm peer support line. But that's a big problem right now is people don't have a place to go, especially with the cold weather. The library was a place where people could get to, they could go use the computers. That's not available now. So that's a real concern. One of the things we did, we called it the Enhanced Outreach Team. We worked with the Human Service Coalition, Salvation Army, OAR, REACH, Adult Protective Service. There they have an outreach worker there. He was part of the team. So we provided porta johns to the homeless encampment and worked with Loaves and Fishes and Salvation Army to provide food 6 days a week. So we were trying to, because the government order was to house in place. It's really hard to house in place if you don't have a house. So we were providing food for people out there 6 days a week, and that's continued. The porta johns are still there. There is an increase of people in our community. We're not clear why. Maybe it's part of what you're saying, Kit. They're coming from other places. There's a lot more people and in the streets, people that we're getting, we're getting to know. So what we're also going to be doing, so there's bathrooms are closed down since COVID. So a lot of people that were homeless, they could sneak into a bar at night and use the bathroom. So there's a lot more, it's a public health concern with people using the outside for a bathroom. So we're also working on getting a couple porta johns somewhere down in I think it's going to be with STAP. It's not clear yet, but it's a concern around what's happening with COVID and people don't have a place to use the bathroom. The shelter does have the bathroom, but there's only 2 bathrooms and people need to take turns going in. And so we're looking at some of that. So that's one of the problems with COVID is people don't have a place to go during the day. And it's more of a concern with the cold weather coming in. And one of the other things that we're working with, we have a relationship with Cuba Medical Center. A lot of the people that we work with, if they go up to the hospital, then they get discharged. There's nobody to help them with a discharge plan because they're homeless. Maybe they don't even have a doctor. They may get referred to mental health or to DSS, but if there's nobody there to help them, remind them to take these extra steps, it's not going to happen. So we're building a relationship with the social workers at the hospital. So they're calling us on a more regular basis saying, hey, so-and-so's up here. Do you know who they are? So we can help them get connected to services when they leave. So I think the more we as a community and service agency to work together, it's going to serve this population more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We have a question that's come to us, and it's specifically for Deana and Kit. Can you provide more information about who is providing the solution-focused, trauma-informed training for your staff? Can you also share more about the Signs of Safety program?
So go ahead, Kit.
That's okay. That's okay. Go ahead, Deana.
So I was going to say the solution-focused trauma-informed care. So internally, it's myself and my colleague, Donna Scott. We were both trained. We spent over a year of training with the two faculty at University of Buffalo School of Social Work who developed this model. So we trained under them for a year, and we've been providing the training to our staff directly now for about a year and a half. Prior to that, the 2 faculty, Denise Krause and Sue Green, came down and provided training to our staff over a period of about 3 years.
And I'll just say briefly, with regards to signs of safety, this is a modality that comes to us from New York State OCFS. We are one of the first counties to actually kind of pilot this. So we were really honored to be asked. A lot of the modality is based on Andrew Turnell's work, which, if people are familiar with him, I can't remember. Maybe the book itself was called Signs of Safety. I can't recall. Yeah. So he had written that book a number of years ago. It's a modality that I think many folks in the child welfare realm have kind of looked at. And so this is just our practice or our process of looking at of working this into our child welfare practice.
And I would add signs of safety also has its foundation is around solution-focused practice also. Yes. So it ties in nicely with what we've already been doing in the department.
Mm-hmm. As you look forward, with no definitive end to the pandemic in sight, no particular time in which we know that a vaccine might be available, what do you see as the challenges, but also opportunities moving forward?
So I can take a stab at that one from kind of the DSS side of things. I think obviously one of the first and greatest challenges is to keep people safe and to keep people, to keep supports going to people as they need them. Certainly, one of our greatest focuses here at DSS is to really look at how can we support people as they may have already lost their jobs, or they may be losing their jobs, or as Susan has indicated, they may be on a continuum, whether it's a mental health continuum or other continuum of needing various kinds of support. So just to kind of, we're probably all a bit tired right now of that old phrase of, we're socially distant, but we need to stay connected. But it really is true to really try to look at how do we continue to get services and supports out to people, despite the fact that there are challenges right now to getting that to folks. But certainly, the largest concern that we have at DSS is to keep supports going, to keep our programs going, despite the fact that we have great challenges in terms of maintaining social distance between staff. We've got people sometimes working from home. We've got all kinds of challenges, but our goal is to keep those operations going, to keep processing cases so that people get the benefits that they need. And we recognize, I think, that although we all hope that this will be a short-lived thing, we recognize this could be a longer-term issue.
So from our perspective at mental health, there are a bunch of opportunities that have come with this crisis. The first one that we think of is that we have clients who have had difficulty getting to us because transportation is an issue. Also, symptoms are an issue. And so the ability to provide telemental health services has certainly opened up opportunities for clients who we weren't really able to capture very well in the past. Someone who is experiencing significant agoraphobia, for instance, getting on a bus and coming to the mental health clinic is a struggle. And now we're connecting even more with those people. Our no-show rates have decreased because we can capture people. We have the ability to get a hold of them. But what you spoke about in the beginning was actually very true too, which is that not everybody has the ability, not everybody has a phone that works. Not everybody has data or minutes. Not everybody has the availability to do a Zoom session. And right now we are able to provide telephonic services, but that's a temporary order from the governor. It's an emergency order. And we don't know how long that will continue. Both the Office of Mental Health and hearing from people like Tompkins County Mental Health, that we really press to be able to continue telephonic services because some people just will never have a laptop to be able to do a Zoom session, right? It's just not going to happen. And some people don't feel comfortable with me being in their home. right? It's different if they're in the office. And it's a challenge being in the office because our offices are small. And can we stay 6 feet apart and wear a mask for 45-minute sessions? That doesn't seem really reasonable, and it's difficult to do that kind of thing without being able to see a face sometimes. So there are challenges, but there are opportunities. I think we're more creative about the way that we see and engage with people.
One of the things with the people that I work with is housing is a real big issue, because right now we don't have enough housing to put people. A lot of people have a voucher, like a Section 8 voucher. And I think what happens with some of the folks that we work with, they have a voucher and they think, great, I have a voucher, I'm going to get a house. And then it stops there. They actually have to fill out applications. They have to find where there is actually available housing. And so a lot of the folks we work with really need intensive case management. It's not enough to get a voucher. It's not enough to get housed in a place where maybe DSS puts you. It's not a checkbox when somebody gets housed. They need to be followed up with. And that's just a missing that we have. It was pre-COVID and it's after COVID. Housing isn't a checkbox, and it's really difficult for this population to be housed. And then, how do you set up a bill to a NICEAG? How do you put your name in NICEAG? All these basic things that you think we would take it for granted. It's really difficult for people that haven't been housed before. So I think that's, it was pre and post COVID, is housing isn't a checkbox, and what's missing is intensive case management, helping people follow through. So I don't have an answer for that, but except in the streets, we're able to do that. We keep reminding people. And like with DSS or at Tompkins County Mental Health, if the people don't come in, you're not able to help them. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's the beauty of having people in the street. We can hey, did you do this? Did you do that? So I think that's an important piece, that the continual follow through is really important for this population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any additional comments to the question? Okay, another question has come to us. How can we encourage more cross-agency collaborations on behavioral health services in our community?
That sounds like me. So one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at Tompkins County Mental Health because of a group that meets regularly, and we discuss the opioid crisis. We've discussed having the ability to have MOUs with our partnering agencies, and we're in the process right now of starting to figure out plans to meet with them and what would that look like. We do some amount of collaboration, but in the past there's actually been meetings that like monthly meetings where all of the mental health and SUD providers get together. And that, because of HIPAA, probably fell away. And we need to figure out how to recreate that. We're in the process of figuring out how to recreate that. And we do need to collaborate, absolutely.
One of the benefits of the community outreach program is we don't need to have releases. So what we can do, the way like I said, I feel like we're a weaver, we weave people together. So if I'm working with you, Ken, and I find out that you're working with somebody at Tompkins County Mental Health, or working with somebody at CARS or adult or Alcohol and Drug Council, you'll say, yes, I want you to be part of the team, Tammy, but you may forget to tell your worker when you go there to add me on the release. So what I can do is I can call Susan and say, hey, I'm working with Ken. Next time he comes in, can you remind him or ask him if he'd be interested in having me on the release? Our conversation a few minutes ago said he was interested in that. So that's the beauty of the outreach program. We have a little bit more flexibility than most other agencies. And I may never hear from Susan again because you went in there and you decided you didn't want me on the release. And that's okay. But that's how I've built a team with a lot of the individuals I work with. So that's one way that the outreach team has a collaboration. And honestly, when I first started doing the position, it was really rough with DSS. And I want to say that they've come a long way. So I'm glad to hear all the training that you're doing, Kit and Deana. It's made a really big difference. a lot more collaboration with the DSS staff. And they all have to work with their own parameters, or any agency does, but they've come a long way and much more of a collaboration, which has really helped serve the people that we work with.
Good, glad to hear it. That's our goal.
Now, I have a question for you. It's a speculative, well, question by its nature speculative, but this is particularly speculative. If by some magic your budget would increase by 50%, what would be at the top of your list for the use of those funds?
For me, it's simple. We'd have another outreach person, have 3 of us instead of 2. We actually need like 5 or 6, but we would just add another outreach person and continue the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I'd add therapists and intensive case managers.
I think, it's a little bit difficult with DSS. We are really large. We have, we have 13, something like 13 different focus areas, program areas, as well as, multi-state and state partners that bring in state and federal programs to us. So it's a little bit hard to know exactly where we would focus. I think what we probably would do is continue our efforts. We really require at all times all of our staff really working all the time, in a very dedicated way on providing all of the programming that we do. People need to be processing applications and handling cases to be able to meet all of the needs in the community. It is not uncommon in terms of our service delivery that we are serving about 15,000 individuals. So that may be multi numbers of people on a case, but about 15,000 individuals in any given month in this community. So it's pretty broad. So I would say that maybe what we would do if we could increase our budget would be to free up staff a bit more, to add more staff and free up more staff to do some of the increased training and increase our efforts around supports for staff that would allow more freedom. But I think that regardless, our core services around serving people that are most in need in the capacities of, those eligibility programs, TA, HEAP, SNAP, and then providing the homeless services supports. Those are all those are on the forefront of what we feel like is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just add to that, if we really had a lot of money, ideally what I think would work well for mental health services, kind of following what Tammy does, is to actually have more satellites. Not have all of our services based on 201 East Green Street, but in fact, go up to West Village and have a satellite there, go to Groton and have a satellite there and have the people to staff it so that we're in the community providing the services that we know that they all need.
I mean, in some ways, what you're saying is very similar to for instance, the Let's Talk model that Cornell Health implemented probably about 15 or so years ago, in which they took their services throughout the campus community during my time there at Cornell, and which continues to this day. Basically these satellites, as opposed to expecting students, and particularly there was a look at how to engage students of color around the issues in terms of mental health, but to go where they were in that sense. And so we're talking about this on a larger scale, or what you're suggesting, I should say.
I guess I would add, like, just piggybacking what you were saying, a satellite office. Like, I can imagine like DSS having a satellite office in all these communities, in Groton and in Lansing and in Dryden, because people have a hard time getting in. So 50,000 would be to hire another outreach worker. Then another 50,000 would be to have a whole bunch of bus passes, because people get housed, they get like $400 for a room and they're not working and they don't have any extra money. So getting back and forth from Groton or Enfield or Lansing to downtown is really difficult. So having more bus passes available for people that can't afford a bus pass to get to their appointments would be really helpful.
We just so people know, a number of years ago, we actually had a system of satellite offices. Our most successful one was actually in Trumansburg. We were in the, I think it was the public, maybe the town hall there, I believe. But we did provide some satellite services in Groton for a while. I believe we actually tried one in Newfield for a while. They were moderately successful. I think it takes a while for people to kind of change their patterns, and there were some challenges with it. That is something that I think if we will see kind of where we're at in this crisis and what makes sense with some of the, as Susan had indicated about mental health, many of the provisions that are in place right now for us to work remotely with people, either over the phone or in other capacities, those are in place temporarily. But I think that in the future, we would certainly try to provide outreach. We certainly do, even as we have worked through the pandemic, we provide some outreach services kind of in specialized ways. We work directly with, for instance, the CARS residential program to provide enhanced outreach. So there's a number of different ways that we can always look at trying to provide that. But right now, because of our current situation, we've got provisions in place already to be working remotely with people through the office. So,
and speaking of outreach too, is there a need for street outreach in rural communities surrounding us?
We provide at DSS, so we certainly, we at DSS are not providing the exact services that Tammy provides through her program, but we certainly reach out to people that we are aware of, and we get calls. Our Adult Protective Services Division gets calls from communities when they have somebody. We will periodically hear somebody's living, in a parking lot or, at the fairgrounds or someplace like that. And we will get a call and we will do that outreach. We will do a visit and try to connect, try to get people set up with services. So I think there probably is, there's probably always greater need with all of this stuff than anybody has full capacity for, but we do have the capacity to reach out, to connect, to get people, the supports that they need. The greatest challenge that Tammy outlined really is that we are oftentimes struggling because housing is really, it is a hardship for people. We are very fortunate right now with the ESG money that's coming our way, and we have what's called the STEP program, the Solutions to End Homelessness program, that will help provide some rapid rehousing and prevention services when that's appropriate for housing. So we have those programs, and whenever we can, we are certainly, putting those in effect to support people who are homeless or at risk of that. Anything I should add there, Deana, around those programs?
I guess the one thing I would add is that with the ESG, we're also helping fund part-time attorney with New York law to help with eviction prevention, so that when the moratorium ends, people have some legal services to address that.
As we know, COVID-19 in many ways has had a disproportionate impact nationally, for instance, on communities of color and such. What are you seeing in terms of local patterns affecting, shall we say, BIPOC populations, Black and Indigenous and other people of color, in terms of need, in terms of the impact, that the ways in which they are impacted by the pandemic that are different from what you've seen, from what you saw prior to the pandemic?
So from our perspective, this is a population, these populations, we don't serve them as much as we think that we should. And of course, what's happened with the COVID-19 crisis is that it makes that worse. It's a matter of reaching people and then understanding what it is they need. And we talk about, we have an internal group that addresses exactly this. We are trying to figure out, how do we reach these populations? How can we help them? And the reason I actually jumped in again and said satellites is because we've talked about that. If we're able to, how could we create a satellite that went to West Village and then figured out how it is that we can help them, how it is, what do they need from us, and what can we help them with, and how can they trust us? You know, so we're having an internal discussion with a group of about 8 people on how we address this issue.
So in our world, one of the big things that's happened with COVID is that there's been early release of a number of folks from prison and jail. And just because of the disproportionality that's already present in those populations, we're seeing a larger increase. So when someone's released from prison, they're released back to their original county of residence. And so I think already we've had well over 30 or more folks come back. So one of the things we did with ESG to address this is we're funding a part-time case management position in OAR to work specifically with the reentry folks and keeping an eye on, you know, how to in particular address those specific needs of people of color who have been impacted through incarceration and now are looking for housing. And OAR also got a grant to work on employment. So there'll be one staff person who's working both on housing and employment with that population.
Great, thank you all.
And in terms of the folks that I work with, it's pretty, I mean, most of the folks that I work with in the streets, it's mostly men. It's a higher percentage, and it's been pretty steady over the last few years of between 18 and 20% of people of color in terms of the street outreach that I do. But I think that what Susan's saying, yes, if we actually went to like West Village and we had even a street outreach, having a satellite office there, but to reach where, if this is a population that's not being served, how do we access that population? So with the street outreach, it says who's ever out there, we'll work with who's ever there. And like the homeless encampment, it's mostly there's two people of color living in the encampment out of like 52 people.
Yes, and I would just say the last piece, I think everything that Deana said is really key to our service provision. And then the other piece is that, you know, we have been engaging over here on multi levels with to really have a dialogue about what are the ways that we can be aware, that we can add this to our awareness of kind of trauma-informed care and the ways that people are impacted, and how do we support folks? You know, I think the piece that is really evident is that fear and mistrust, that concern about, can I reach out? If I do reach out, am I going to get support? Am I going to get respectful support? Am I going to get compassionate support, which is what we're really talking about today. So to really be able to keep that a part of the dialogue and to be able to have an awareness as an organization of how we're supporting people, I think is really key.
Great. Well, we are very much appreciative of the work all of you do to support members of our community, in particular those who are underserved in our population. And we are really very grateful for you joining us today and sharing your perspective on how to provide compassionate services social services and mental health services. And I personally, I appreciate this from the standpoint of being the brother of a retired social worker, the father of a current social worker, having a stepmother who is a retired social worker, and a wife who's a developmental psychologist. And so I am really appreciative of the work that you all are doing, and look forward to collaborating with you in the future, not only in terms of programs like these, but also in terms of how we might be able to support various populations who are underrepresented and who are struggling with some of the most basic and essential issues of life. So again, thank you all. And we want to thank our audience as well for being with us and for joining us today as well. We will meet again next month around the middle of November, in which we will be taking on the topic of centering race and other forms of equity in one's work. So we will have information out about this event as we come closer to the date. So hope that you all will be able to join us. So thank you again, my participants and colleagues, and thank all of you who joined us today for this event.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.